Hey folks, it's Nick with Bootstrap Farmer. I have made a lot of mistakes in my career, and I've seen a lot of people make a lot of other mistakes, especially in the shoulder seasons as we're planting out our fall and winter gardens. So in this video, we're going to be talking about a lot of tips and tricks and things to think about as you're planning, prepping, and picking out your varieties. And we're going to talk about this little experiment that we have going on right here. So look, the biggest problem that you're going to find is a lot of people are starting the wrong seeds at the wrong time of year. So I want you to think about any type of fruiting crop that's going to be long-term. We're talking over 55, 60 days to even start fruiting. Tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, squash, zucchini, anything like that that's going to take up a lot of real estate and a lot of time where you could be churning other crops instead of waiting on this one crop to put out just a little bit right before freeze and it's going to die anyway. So let's start getting those crops into the ground that make more sense this time of year. So what are we talking about? So from a market gardener standpoint, a gardener, a homesteader, all of the real estate that's in your garden and that's in your hoop house is very valuable. And so what we don't want to do this time of year is waste time with those crops that's going to take a little bit of extra time before it even yields any fruit. So before we plant any seeds whatsoever, let's take a look at some of the seasonal extension tools and equipment and practices that you can do. So no matter what you plant this time of year, if it makes sense, then it's going to be protected. So in that line of thinking, let's go over the good, better, and best case scenario. Good is that you're doing proper seed selection, that you're going to grow frost-tolerant or cold-hardy vegetables, root crops, leafy greens that are going to withstand some of these colder temperatures and actually thrive in that cold. This means that just the proper seed selection alone means a lot more success even without any bed covers, cold frames, or hoop houses. We're going to get into some of those crops here in just a bit, but we're talking about spinach, kale, carrots, cabbage, that kind of thing. Some of the practices that fall under the good category still are we doing mulches? Are we amending the soil to drain a little bit better? What we don't want is a lot of moisture getting into the ground and then freezing at the root zone. Just think about insulating those roots because that's where the growth is coming from. Now we also need to protect the leaves, especially if you're going to be getting hit with a lot of frost all the time, and that is going to take us to the better scenario. Better scenario is low tunnels. When we talk about low tunnels a lot this type of year, we talked about a lot at Bootstrap Farmer in general in 2024. That's because we have these cross connectors and low tunnel kits in which you can build an EMT frame once and use it year after year. You can either leave it up and take it on into the spring and the summer with insect netting and shade cloth, or you could take it apart and store it if that's not something you're going to be doing next season. So back to low tunnels, we're talking about something to put a frost blanket, either a single layer or a multiple layer. If you want to take a look at our 4-part series on frost blanket use, specifically in low tunnels, click the link above and it'll take you right to that playlist. In those videos, we talk about the different layers of 1.5, 2.5, and 4-ounce blankets, either used as a single or as a double frost blanket situation to get yourself a few degrees of frost protection. That also means that you're keeping that moisture from hitting the leaves and then frosting, which then turns into a black mold, destroying the leaves, wiping out your harvest. Just remember that when you're using those low tunnels, that in addition to the snap clamps, you may want to pick up a few sandbags along the way. That way you can button up the sides or any uneven areas you can kind of shore up with a sandbag to protect those cold hardy crops. Pro tip is make sure that even if you're under the frost blanket, that you're still planting the cold weather crops. A frost blanket is not going to protect tropicals. It's not going to protect tomatoes or anything that's going to survive under that 45, 55 degree mark, depending on the variety of any of those fruiting crops. And of course, the best, we can't take another second without mentioning hoop houses around here. Bootstrap Farmer makes an all-metal hoop house made right here in the United States with U.S.-sourced metal. I'm very proud of them. These are all-inclusive hoop houses, including the end walls, the doors, no wood to buy locally. It comes with metal hipboard and baseboard, and the shipping is included in the price. If you want better prices, give our tech team a call, and they'll be able to help you customize the hoop house to your specific location and for your specific needs. They're going to account for trusses, irrigation, wind braces, all that kind of stuff that's going to make the difference no matter where you're at in the country. So under a hoop house, you are giving yourself a big buffer of air mass. And that air mass, which we cover a lot more in this video above, Basically takes the warm air that you're able to generate throughout the course of the day and store it. And even though it dissipates overnight, that stored heat is retained inside of the soil, and that buffer in between the day and the night with that air mass is what's keeping those roots warm. You can also do things like incorporate the frost blanket inside of the hoop house for a little bit of added protection. And let's be serious, that can be a big investment up front. You may or may not have room for that, especially if you're in a home garden situation. We do have smaller kits available. Go ahead and talk to the tech team and see if they can find a solution for you. But that upfront cost once is going to carry you years into the future, both benefiting you in the winter and in the summer. Or are you going to plant early enough to hit those spring sales dates well ahead of everybody else in your market? So having those dates, knowing those days to maturity, how much you plan to plant out, and forecasting on into next year on some of those highlighted dates and starts of successions are going to make a big difference between, do you have enough seeds? Do you have enough prepped soil? Are you ready to go? Okay, so here's the section we've all been waiting for. It's what are we going to plant in October? So our lawyers are telling me, nobody's telling me nothing, but the fine print is we are in Texas. We're making this video for people all over the country. And so there's a little bit of responsibility on your part to listen to some of the varieties that we're going to talk about, but do your due diligence, take a look at those frost dates, take a look at the back of the seed package or the description online, and make sure that even though we're talking about it, is this a right fit for you? Is your family not going to eat beets? Don't plant beets. Is nobody at your market asking for rutabagas? Don't plant rutabagas. So number one, kale. Kale is exceptionally hardy and can withstand heavy frost, which often enhances its flavor. The colder it gets, a lot of times these leafy greens that we're going to be talking about, and even some of the root crops, especially the carrots, parsnips, the sweeter they become. There's something called Brix. Brix is the amount of sugar levels that's inside of leafy greens or roots naturally. The colder it gets, typically those Brix levels go up, and it's a better taste. With kale, check the varieties for the cold tolerance. That's just what I was talking about. If you're going to do successions of kale or any of the leafy greens we talk about, just plan to go ahead and start with multiple varieties at different times of the year. The colder it gets, the more cold hardy those varieties are going to be. You also want a soil that is rich in organic matter and provide a regular watering. Don't get complacent in the wintertime. All of these crops still require water. It does require a little bit of extra care with your irrigation lines that, hey, if a frost is coming, water a couple of days ahead. In general, make sure the lines are drained. That way, if there's water inside of the lines, it doesn't freeze and bust your irrigation. Number two on the list, if I had to really specialize in something going back into farming, it would be carrots. Carrots always sell out at the market, so make sure you put this on your list for sure. It's a great crop to store in the ground, so even if you're not harvesting week after week, they can sit in the ground and cold store themselves, especially at a level like this, which would be a smaller farm or a hobby garden. You can leave those in the ground, protect them with a little bit of frost blanket, you're good to go. So some choices you might want to look at are varieties such as Nantes and Davenders. Davenders, always a crowd favorite. It's a nice straight 8-inch or so carrot. It's one I always did direct seeding with my Jang seeder with. Both Nantes and Davenders do great in cold climates. Just make sure that your soil is loose and well drained, and this is a good time to get out that broadford. We have a garlic video that goes over some details on planting garlic, but if you're thinking about having garlic in the spring, please plant them in October. That gives them time to establish before the winter. You might want to consider a hardneck variety that is especially good in the cold. Garlic is one of those things you need to source kind of carefully. Just make sure you're getting those cloves from a reputable seed source. Again, you need well-draining soil and then mulch over heavily to protect from any frost or snow as these crops are in ground over the winter to pop up in the spring. So let's take a look at some of the stuff we planted here at Bootstrap Farmer that we're going to use in our own home gardens. Number one, leeks. We planted everything. I've got a small place now, so everything's in a 6x6 that I can take. I don't need a whole bunch of anything right now. So take a look at some of the seed starting trays. Depending on your size, you either is going to use a cell tray, an air prune tray, the 6 cells in which you can get 72 plants in 110-20. We also have 6 packs in the Whispering Willow colors, just like we have in the 2.5-inch pots behind us. And then we have different varieties to up pot. I got a special little experiment that we're doing this year in a 5-inch pot that we'll go over at the end of the video. Leeks can tolerate cold weather and frost. You need to plant them in deep, fertile soil and hill the soil up around the stems to blanch them. So basically, anytime we are going to take this plug and plant it, I'm going to just make a little mound of dirt in there, protect the bulb a little bit, and as the leaf goes straight up in the air, it has a little bit of support. Second crop we're talking about is parsnips. You can see on that nice little colored label that we have now. Parsnips, one of my favorite things. I like to cut them up and use them in all kinds of soups. If you don't know what a parsnip is, the cashier at my local grocery store always refers to that as a white carrot. He's wrong. So, parsnips are very cold hardy and can be left in the ground over winter. Just like carrots, you're going to plant in deep, loose soil and keep well watered. Next up in my 6-packs are some Brussels sprouts. One of my favorites. Anytime you can take a Brussels sprout, cut that guy in half, throw it in with some butter, some of that garlic you're planting, a little bit of bacon, or a lot of bacon, and some onions, good to go. You can substitute the onions with some of the leeks you're planting. Always a crowd favorite. It's going to move well at the market. Brussels sprouts can withstand very frosty conditions and actually taste sweeter and sweeter after the frost. Just like we talked about, that Brix level is going to go up. It's in the cabbage family. It's very, very similar. It's just super shrunk down. They grow up on a stalk and you pull them. Perfect. Now we're going to go to Atlanta to our correspondent, Mylan Turner from ATL Grow. We're going to see what he's planting in his garden.
The first crop that I'm planting today is beets, and I'm planting the Detroit Red variety from Haas Tools. This is an heirloom variety that matures in about 60 days. This is one of your traditional beets that grows to about 3 to 4 inches in size. It produces a nice deep red color, hence the name. I have grown this variety before, but one thing that's new to me is I'm using the seed tape to plant them out. The seed tape is essentially just strips of paper that hold the seeds in place to ensure proper spacing. What's different about the seed tape from Haas Tools is it actually has fertilizer built in to help feed the plants as they grow. With the cooler temps and the rainy weather that we've had this week, I expect germination in about 7 days or so. And as I mentioned the maturity earlier, these should be ready to harvest in about 60 days or so. They may take a little bit longer in the fall as the days get shorter as fall goes along, but then they'll be ready for pickling or putting in salads or roasting.
Thanks, Milan. We're also not going to forget that Swiss chard is a great thing to grow this time of year. You can use the leaves, you can use the stalks. It loves the cold. Colder it gets, the sweeter it gets. It gives a lot of color to a lot of dishes. For those of you trying to eat the rainbow and get a little bit of color into your life, Swiss chard, good way to go. It can be served cold. You can stir fry it up. You can blanch it. Very versatile in the kitchen. All right, here's a little bonus crop that maybe some of you might want to experiment with, and that is, according to this little label, horseradish. I like roast beef sandwiches, and what I refuse to eat a roast beef sandwich without is a little bit of horseradish. So we ordered a cutting, and we have put it in this 5-inch pot. We watered it in a couple of weeks ago, and look at that, we already got the first leaf. So we are going to keep that in this 5-inch container for a few more weeks, let the leaf get a little bit bigger. Horseradish will take over the world, so you have to plant it inside of a container. So what we're hoping to do is to root this out really nice over the course of the next few months, indoors, inside of where we're at right now, and then put that inside of a bigger grow bag, and then grow that outside next season. Will it work? We'll let you know. And the only way that you'll be able to find out is if you subscribe to the channel and keep up with all the silly stuff that we're doing. So we put out a lot of videos. We're trying to help every which way we can. I'm not going to blow smoke with you. I'm only going to tell you something that we have either done ourselves, we've talked directly to a farmer about, or in this case, we're doing a direct experiment. Now, if you have horseradish chips for us, we would love to see it in the comments below, because this is the first time we've done it. But the point is, give yourself a little bit of freedom, give yourself a little bit of room to do some of these experiments. Gardening is supposed to be fun. Farming is supposed to be fun. You're supposed to be enjoying what you do for a living. Give yourself something to do that's going to make you happy. So another little tip, especially for this time of year, with the weather changing and your hands are in the soil and it's getting colder, and maybe your hands are getting dry, it's a great time to use something like this Aveeno Daily Moisturizing Body Lotion. So I actually got one last group of crops that we weren't going to talk about here. It's coming up in a video, but I've got some starts behind us that we're going to talk about. But even though we're going to do this in a soilless version in deep water culture, I want you to think about incorporating this very important group of crops into your garden for one reason. But before we get to that, Again, your comments really help us figure out what we're going to do in the next round of videos. There's quite a few of us that are deciding what to do and what to put out, and knowing what you're interested in, especially if we hear it more than twice, we're able to dedicate time to what we need to do for you guys. So please like, please subscribe, pass this on if you think it's a valuable resource to any of your farming groups, or anytime you're in a Facebook group. If we said something that connects with you, it's likely to connect with other people. And again, we're here, right? Like, you can call us 7 days a week. Our customer service team, there's nobody better in the industry that does it better than our customer service folks. Give them a call. We're answering the phone 7 days a week. Let us know how we can help you. And again, if you can't wait till spring, you're wanting to garden, there's no harm in starting a few of these plants and just seeing how it goes on a very small basis. We encourage you to look at those frost dates. We encourage you to look at where your plants are going to live once they get planted out. Is there a shade tree? Is it behind a building? Are you going to restrict your sun? Take a look at where you're actually going to be planting, and is it a good fit for some of these crops? So once you do that, you can kind of start narrowing down some of those varieties, look at those last frost dates, look ahead at that calendar and see if you have enough time, or do you need a little bit of seasonal extension like the frost blankets, or like building some blow tunnels, or possibly even going ahead and investing in a hoop house. So with all that being said, let's take a look at some of the starts that we have on this very important category that we're going to do it in another upcoming video. Another reason to subscribe. So speaking of subscribers, Joey Harris, we see you, we hear you, you've asked for it. You, Joey Harris, have personally asked for us to do this video. This is the start of your Asian greens video we're making especially for you. So Asian greens are great this time of year. A lot of them fall within the brassica family, so we're talking about things we talked about in September, the September video, right? Broccoli, cabbage, kale, radishes, all that stuff. You can also grow it at a smaller scale. So I want you, everybody watching this video, if you go to the grocery store right now, and the biggest section of the produce, aside from the carrots and potatoes and onions, is that big, weird pile of garbage that is just bagged up, boxed up, and labeled spring mix. Your average consumer doesn't know what any of this is, and it's basically a lot of some of the stuff that we're going to be talking up in that upcoming video. Aside from red vein sorrel, which you also need to do, I'm not including that in this video, but we're taking a look at shingunku, tatsoi, mizunas, pak choys, all of these things that are going to do a turn in 30 days. And what I mean by that is a head of lettuce, 45 days minimum, upwards of 55 days from the time you transplant it to the time you harvest. Asian greens, 30 days. So that means that every 30 days you're able to cut and replant a transplant. These were planted, 3 days ago? So it's a very quick turnaround, and it's a very quick way to propagate a lot of stuff really fast. Wherever you get your seeds, type in Asian greens, see what they have available, and experiment with these. There's a lot of color, there's a lot of taste, there's a lot of texture, there's a lot of different stuff that you don't get from typical leafy green. So take a look at that for now. We're going to grow this stuff out in our deep water kit that's behind these cameras right now, and hopefully in about a month we'll have that ready for you. Joey, got you, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks so much.